Welcome to this interesting series that we are conducting today with in association with Google, where we are going to talk about how the financial services organizations are fast tracking their growth. So I am Babu Nair. I publish Banking Frontiers magazine. This is a specific perspective from the NBFC side, and we are going to have conversations with four interesting luminaries today. And of course, our partner for this session or the presenting partner for this session is Google, which has always been in the forefront also when it comes to empowering organizations with agility, speed, security, and cloud. So we have Satish Venkatraman. Satish, can you please introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody. My name is Satish Venkatraman, and I'm with Sundram Finance Limited. I'm in the IT function, where I'm the delivery head. So I have a techno-functional background, having worked with several large banks like Standard Chartered Bank, Deutsche Bank, as well as Barclays Bank.
And our next panelist today is Pratik Gupta. Pratik, can we have the privilege of knowing a little bit about you as well?
Absolutely. Thank you, Babu. And first of all, good afternoon to all the audience and also to the fellow panelists. My name is Pratik Gupta. I lead strategy and business development for Aditya Birla Finance. Aditya Birla Finance is one of the top 5 private diversified NBFCs in India. And we have about 15 different lines of business. I look after strategy, new product growth, digital initiatives, new customer segments across all these lines of business, which I would say span corporate, SME, MSME, and retail customers, even the small ticket digital loans. Yeah. Prior to Aditya Birla Finance, I spent close to 10 years with BCG, Boston Consulting Group, where I also got an opportunity to work with multiple financial services players, I would say banks, insurance companies, even service providers. So I have a bit of a background across multiple lending institutions from my consulting time, and obviously a much stronger exposure to NBFCs at Aditya Birla Finance. That's my profile. I look forward to a very good, very enriching discussion today.
Lovely.
Over to you,
We
Babu.
will,
Yeah.
we will look forward for some very interesting conversation with you as well. And let me move to Rukesh. Rukesh, hi. Welcome in that wonderful green background. So let us know a little more about the greenery of your career as well and what you have been doing.
Absolutely. I say I don't get much chance to get onto Zoom. We use Microsoft Teams. So I had to quickly set it up and find something. Thank you very much. Really appreciate that. Lovely to meet all the panelists as well. So my background, I have been away overseas for about 20 years in Australia, been with American Express, been with PricewaterhouseCoopers, Lloyds Bank, to FMCG like Woolworths, and travel as well. So here in about 2015, worked led the technology for Geo Financial Services, so the Geo Money app, which hasn't still gone live, but started my career there in India in 2015, and now have moved to Edelweiss Finance. So at Edelweiss Finance Limited in the lending space, where everything that Pratik talked about, we also into all kinds of loans, right from corporate to agri to retail.
Fantastic. So you handle IT there?
Yes, so I'm the CTO, where I mean titles don't really matter, but I led the technology.
Fantastic.
In technology for a long time. So all my career I've been in technology. I've worked right from speech recognition in early 90s. What capability that you see today in Echo and Google and Siri. And then, we worked on everything, like from mainframes to client servers to, all the internet based and to the geeky stuff around, ML, AI, lately. So, yeah, very broad, but all in technology.
So, love to know a little more from your global experience as well.
Absolutely.
And love to know a lot more. So from there, let us move to our another interesting luminary today, Mitesh. Can you just share some perspectives of yourself?
Thank you, Babu, and thank you for inviting me to the panel. Privileged to be here with all the luminaries and you. So I handle the technology function here at Google and Google Cloud. Uh, a relatively new, entrant to the Google business. It's been under 6 months, and my background actually is quite non-linear. I started with a services company way back, which was Wipro. Then went on to set up the e-commerce business for Ramco. Then joined Sun Microsystems for a number of years, and then joined Oracle. Was there for about 18 years, and then recently joined Google. So privileged to be here on the panel, learn as well as share a few viewpoints that I have.
So when it comes to the NBFC sector, okay, with innovation being the new constant, how are organizations like yours working towards fast tracking these? What kind of uh, foundations are on which you are working towards creating this, fast tracking this innovation in this kind of era? So how are you going about bringing in more agility to your business, more security to your business, more optimization to your businesses? So Pratik, would you like to take
Sure.
from the business perspective first?
Sure, Babu. No, absolutely. I think digitization is a theme today, as you said, digitization, innovation is a theme across businesses, across industries, or even across functions, right? You take manufacturing, there'll be shop floor automation. You take sales, there'll be sales tech, marketing tech, and so on, right? Coming to the lending sector again, this has been a theme throughout. But I would say the last 6 months have been pretty dramatic in terms of a shift, a step change in terms of the digitization journey for lending institutions as a whole, both banks and NBFCs. And that is because the pandemic actually forced you, or as a lender, to offer digital solutions necessarily to your customers. You didn't have an option, right? If you have an option, the change happens, but it happens at a slow pace. If you don't have an option, you can't meet your customers physically. Digital is the only option. You got to change, right? You're forced to change, right? And that's when the change happens pretty quickly. So I saw, I would say, across banks, across NBFCs, a significant drive towards digitization across the board. That's what I would say last 6 months. Very specifically, if I talk about the customer onboarding journey, yeah, that journey has been the focus. How can you onboard lending customers digitally, without even meeting them? How can you do that? That has been a big focus area for lenders, I would say, last 3-4 years for sure, but last 6 months we've seen step changes there, right? And just to also bring perspective to this group and everyone, the audience, the customer onboarding journey, there are 3 or 4 I would say basic steps, right? You have to do KYC, that's compliance, that's regulatory. You have to know your customer, that's your KYC. You have to do fraud checks. You don't want to give your loans, your money, to people, to customers, MSMEs, or individuals who are fraudsters, right? Who have a bad history of duping lending institutions. So KYC is first, fraud checks is second. The third is a very big element is credit assessment, right? You want to make sure the customer has a good repayment track record. He's been paying to other lenders. If he's not a new to credit customer, he's been paying to other lenders in a regular fashion. And a big part of credit assessment is also assessing his ability to pay your loan, to repay your loan, right? So that's your third element. And the fourth element is the modus operandi of payments, right? How does the customer repay you? Typically, we enable eNACH, which is a digital mode. So these 4 buckets, I talked about KYC, I talked about fraud checks, I talked about credit assessment, which is both about having a good repayment track record and his ability to pay your loan. And lastly, how does he repay you on a monthly basis? all of these four elements, multiple sub-elements, we can talk about that. This has been digitized in a very big way. Everywhere there are different API partners. You'll have Aadhaar, for example, UIDAI, you'll have NSDL for PAN checks, you'll have banking statement checks for credit assessment and so on, right? But all of these journeys, I would say to some extent were being digitized by many lenders over the last 3-4 years. But last 6 months, I would say we've seen a very big step change for all these four buckets, a big step change towards digitization. That's what I would say. I'll share more as time proceeds,
Fantastic.
Babu. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that. Let me introduce you to also Suresh Shanmugam. Suresh, can you just quickly share a short intro, please?
Good evening, everyone. And I do handle the head and innovations for future technologies in Mahindra financial service sector. And again, this COVID has put us at least to get engaged again, even virtually, and try to get use cases and what are things we do in rural India. Surely, it's a lot more to go and a lot more to learn and share and learn to earn, so that it gets more on things to take it on the rural India. So anyway, when we are in the main of the questions, surely we will share what best practices we do during COVID and post-COVID.
Fantastic. Suresh, look forward to know a lot more from you from the rural perspective also. So great perspective, Pratik. You have given a business perspective there. So let me go to the technologists in the team right now. Maybe I can start off with Rukesh. Rukesh, you have seen a lot of optimized, industry is seeing a lot of optimized, personalized experience and secure. How has it been in your organization, and how are you technologically trying to ramp up and build a foundation to achieve all this?
Yeah, no, it's a very good segue to what Pratik was talking about, because especially in lending. But see, if you think about personalization, right? Largely the history of personalization, I call it, where n equals n, n equals s, n equals 1. So n equals n is like TV advertisements. N equals S is where you kind of take demographic information and say, okay, I'm going to, target this person. And N equals 1 is, what Google and Amazon and, like the homepage of Amazon that you see is very personalized to you itself, right? Now, from an NBFC perspective, from what Pratik is talking about, where we are with personalization is in mainly around 3 areas I see. Still not in the front end, and let me explain. So, Pratik kind of talked about that whole journey around how lending happens. So you have to decide. So, the credit decisioning, which is about deciding whether to give a loan or not. Now that is super personalized. You cannot use n equals s or n equals n, right? You got to individualize, understand the customer, whatever their bank balances are, financial statements, etc. So that part is kind of, and that part, how much of it is digital, how much of it is manual. I think the AI ML part is just kicking into that area where you've started getting assisted, a little bit of smartness to help the underwriters make those decisions. So a lot of analysis, which they had to do, triangulation that they had to do across multiple things. Now the algo can do that. Right? So that's in the credit decisioning side. The other areas which we've started experimenting a little bit around is the credit predictive analytics around, are you going to get your money back? So the payments piece that Pratik kind of talked about. Can you do some predictive analytics by continuously monitoring the customer? And this was largely for the SME loans. Can you do triangulation with public as well as private data and see if you can, predict before the customer even realizes that they won't be able to pay back. So very early stages in that area. The other area where we've got a little bit more, personalization is in the customer servicing. So when the customer calls, you're able to, cater a little bit personalized to whatever their issues and problems are. Right? So far, I haven't seen a lot of headway into the real personalization on the front end side of it. Where you got customer journeys personalized, depending on what data you give, I can direct different journeys. But I guess, where we are is the foundation of what we have currently got, and we'll just build from there to get into the hyper personalization space.
Fantastic. I think that's a good perspective. And you have already jumped into a couple of important areas which I want to take it up in the discussion in the in the future questions as well. Coming back to you, Mitesh, you have been a technologist. You have worked in different organizations across the financial sector. When organizations are using, looking at or aiming at all this optimized, personalized experience and security with agility, what are the kind of foundations on which these kind of demands or needs of these organizations can be given consistently to the sector?
Yeah, thanks, Babu. I think some very relevant points made by all the panelists. I think technology fundamentally is going to be an enabler there, right? So if you really look at, we use the term agility as part of your question, right? And very interestingly, we've seen, and our experience has been, that agility shows up only when there are constraints. And the pandemic was the biggest constraint, right? And as a result, as was mentioned earlier by Prateek, right, automatically a lot of our customers started saying that, look, if we have to be agile, then we have to be digital. Now, to be digital, you need an optimized infrastructure. The reality is that our customers were not running an optimized infrastructure, and investing in an on-premise infrastructure was mistaken for an optimized infrastructure. The second part is that you used, another part of the question was personalization, right? Now, very relevant points made earlier on personalization, and personalization can be divided into 2 or 3 areas. The first one is that, what is the experience you give a customer irrespective of the touch point they make with you, right? And what is the experience you make with them across the various channels, with what is called omnichannel, right? So in the past, if they came to your branch, versus today they going to your website or your mobile app or to an aggregator or an insurtech if you are selling insurance, or to a lending aggregator and so on, is your experience the same? The second part of the equation is especially relevant to the NBFC community, is that what happens when they are, for example, making a claim, if you're selling insurance to them, right? Is your experience seamless even there, right? So I think for that, one of the very important elements is customer segmentation. And one of the things that we've seen is that there is a lot left on the table on the customer segmentation part, and that's where the real applicability of the cool terms like AI and ML really come in. So how can you do an ML based segmentation as opposed to, let's say, a typical spreadsheet based segmentation? So to me, this is the differences between truly using digital technologies there. The final element of all of this is you spoke about how can you make sure everything is secure, right? Now, what our experience has been, and several stats have said this, that if you really look at cloud, by default, it's obviously way more secure, right, than what customers would generally tend to implement on premise. The interesting element of there is that usually it's the human element of not implementing things that you've bought or not updating things that you've bought, right, that tend to lead to security issues. Whereas on the cloud, what ends up happening is, because there's so much of automation, right, so there is no manual intervention that happens, right? So as a result, you're secure by default. And of course, there are a bunch of underlying technologies that help you even more. So what we've done at Google Cloud is really be able to give that omni-channel experience, give a very secure and agile environment for people to spin up, and equally spin down environments. During the pandemic, there were a number of businesses that needed to spin down, and if you had invested in CapEx, you had no way but to spin down things, right? And the third thing is really be able to personalize all of this for you, right, and make sure that you have an optimized experience end to end. So I think those are the things that we're really focused on to really help the non-banking financial services customers across India and the world.
Fantastic. Fantastic. That's a you have already taken the discussion towards a cloud perspective now, and that is one perspective which many of the organizations have been looking in. The financial fraternity initially started off as a strict no-no towards cloud. Then they started having a attitude of, hey, let's check it out, let's date with it. Okay. Now with the pandemic, with the kind of the various challenges people are seeing with it, they are now looking at, hey, let's try and adopt it, see what the regulator has to say, and things like that. We have a lot of NBFCs anyways doing a lot of work around the cloud per se. Suresh, as a innovator, as an innovations guy, you have a lot of challenges, especially with the rural market being one of your major area of business. How have you seen regulations build around the cloud, and how have you, as a organization, tried to leverage the cloud in the past, and what is your outlook towards it?
It's a great question where it's part of the cloud, how we see things, and especially Google Cloud. Since we are from rural India, that's what we see that it's a difference between Google Maps and Google Earth. It starts with that, and something now it's more arrived is what Google Offline, which is for us we use as much as part of it. So when it comes to enabling and smart NBFC, especially the mix is what so far is more to do with the traditional way of enterprise in terms of essential infrastructure, virtualization, operating systems, migration, mobility, security, what are jargons. Get into cloud integration. Again, we see the other side, social media, web presence, getting into the management tools, how great IT efficiency. That's the way it started building. But in our case, since we operate more in rural India and try to get engaged with different segments, we had something called earn to pay model. Means get engaged with the customer, make him to earn so that he pays for us. So that is nothing but just it doesn't end with the business. You have to get engaged with him through the traditional way of what all things he's doing and trying to give them that effectiveness so that he can earn, so that he can pay for it. So how the system supports part of a cloud, especially keeping centrally stored with the distributed data capturing and omni channels. What are you are going to put captured both online, offline? Again, we are having electricity issues, part of it, connectivity, electricity, and the resource availability. So we have created a small centrally stored with distributed capturing, where an on-premise data center, which is to have more in terms of internal, what are we do, have the schemes and what are we are trying to float around, which will be part of the internal structure, which entertains that internet, where for the dealers, brokers, agents, everything, they will be trying to participate on the on-premise data center. The second one is what on the enterprise cloud service, where the matured, the bandwidth cloud, other things are available, where we are able to use the mediator as service, who will be participating part of the enterprise cloud service and trying to use and get engaged for their kind of relevancy and solutions. The third one is what more to do with that, what are we call today part of the artificial intelligence, what are you call it for more than 2 decades, what we do, which is more to do with high density data, where this is not available across, but this is available based on the business and more to do with the, even for example, it's consumer durables. You want to use some consumer related engagement with the customer, trying to get engaged with the other available solutions part of it, then it matters a lot. It goes to that extreme to the product and to the people who try to use it out. So keeping these three different ways, even though it is centrally stored with distributed data capture, one side we have the rural as an impact, we are able to get engaged, and the customers in their delight, what happens, we are not looking only for the collection or a business, we will give other options for their business, which created a re-business. Again, it's less of electronics, more of emotions, which caters a lot how we can try to do part of the system, which empowers it. Suppose a question, why we try? The expectation is what so far it was used is nothing but a customer is not seen much on that. We have seen only corporate digital. The technology touchwood was more revolving. Even regulators were focusing more on the corporate digital. Now the corporate digital is moved to customer digital, where every individual customer is going to be a corporate and the technology is going to revolve around. For example, a good customer or bad customer is nothing but to see a bank statement, and any check bounce is there, he is called as a bad customer. Now moving to the social and the kind of availability about the customer, part of the social, the kind of things spoken about the customer or the company is going to add value to us to find out how customer is seen and is visible in the social media. So that things are getting transformed. So the corporate digital is visible more on the customer digital, where the kind of platforms and clouds enables us to get more information. That's where we are able to cope up and we are able to get it out. So functional part, people are able to give the customer corporate centricity. From the technology part, we have enabled with the kind of platforms available to connect and get the things better for the future prospects.
Fantastic. So that's a good perspective from the both the business perspective and the encircling around the customers and customization. Rukesh, you have used cloud, I think, quite often, and you have been at least you are a veteran in usage of cloud per se. Some of the very interesting things that have come across when people have been seeing using cloud is there are lock-in periods, which basically many of the customers are scared of, or maybe there are usage of multiple clouds where in a multi-cloud strategy, how do organizations get the best benefit out of it? So, what is your perspective, especially when it comes to usage of this cloud ecosystem, and how do you view an ideal multi-cloud strategy there?
So look, at Edelweiss, we have got both Google as well as Azure. Sorry, not Google, AWS as well as Azure. I thought Mitesh was just going like, oh, Google. No, sorry, I'm sorry. And we backed off on what Mitesh talked about in terms of security. I think the primary concern around people around getting onto cloud is security, right? RBI published a cloud paper to say how all the PSUs need to get onto cloud. And, it's available. So there are no restrictions of saying whether you should or you should not. And, in getting onto cloud, the biggest concern that everybody has is about security. But I don't see that as a big concern, because if you are securing what you have to do correctly on-prem, then that's no different to doing it on cloud. And cloud, as Mitesh pointed out, it's like fully autonomous. Therefore, the security, if you can build in and if you can script it, it's all there. So, and the PDP regulation coming in. So, if you got to encrypt your data and, there are concerns around data and data localization and all, then, that can also be addressed. One of the other things you asked there is around SaaS service providers, right? And so, look, we also use SaaS service providers like Salesforce. We've also used OutSystems, which is our low-code platform. And these providers host everything on cloud. So we haven't had any major, we don't see any major, we only see the benefits. Where we have gone in stage one at the moment, which I believe where we have currently gone, is just moving all our compute from on-prem onto the cloud. And what it has done for us is, it's taken care of a lot of the security things that Mitesh kind of talked about in terms of patching and all of that, because all of that is automated. It's also taken care of aging infrastructure that we had to manage and, continuously spend on the capital spend on buying new hardware. So, a lot of that is converted into OpEx. And now we are able to have that flexibility of, going upscaling or downscaling as and when, looking at our, CPU utilization or hard disk utilization. So from compute, it has made a huge difference. We have also started experimenting bits and pieces where we've got few applications that are going into the consumption space. So consumption, which is cloud native, using Lambda functions, using, S3s and, using the charging models that are not compute based, but based on per call, per request, right? And, that's a work in progress. So it's kind of getting there, but it's working out brilliantly for us. It's paying back. It's taken us, it's allowed all the developers and our operations guys who are focused on maintaining the infra is now focused on adding more business value.
Fantastic. So it is more from, being just a tech focused kind of role to more of business focus, and the tech takes work on the background.
Absolutely.
Perfectly fine. Mitesh, any perspective from your side? How has the industry's, outlook towards the cloud changed in the past few years? And how have they been in the forefront now when it comes to empowering innovations with the cloud or things like that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Babu. So, in fact, if you look at financial services, surprisingly, while, as you rightly pointed out, originally started slow, and I think it was, I would call it the Cloud 1.0 era, where there were lots of these concerns that folks had. And increasingly, I think some of this is also about the power of experimentation, and I call it the graveyard of pilots that happen, right? And one thing that I really realized, especially in the NBFC world, right? I think they were the first set of financial services, organizations that started moving and adopting public cloud services far faster, right? And I think it typically started, and it was always a journey, right? They would start off with some internal applications or applications that are more customer facing and so on, right? And I think as all the big public cloud providers, including Google, right, started setting up units in India, data centers in India, and so on, there was a lot more comfort around data privacy, data sovereignty, and the general let's say mental blocks around cloud, which was there, right? So that's the first part. The second part was that when it's like when they started seeing the benefits, it was very important, because I think originally not everybody did a great job of positioning cloud the right way. It was positioned as a cost optimization solution, and very soon most customers started comparing it with, oh, but my on-premise cost of acquisition of hardware is much cheaper in India, so therefore cloud is not so cost effective for them. The reality is that people were not adding the cost of how they can go faster to the market, right? And NBFCs, for example, it's extremely competitive, right? How would you differentiate organization A versus organization B versus C? A lot of it has got to do with the customer experience. So while terms like digital transformation were, let's say, spoken a lot about, there was limited true investment around it. There was limited, I would say, we were wanting to use the same set of tools to get a different outcome. And I think, what we've seen is a number of organizations, and I can give you a few examples. So if you look at, and I'm going to divide this into three areas. There are organizations that are large banks, like we have a 100-year-old organization like MetLife, right? Which wants to transform itself into a digital bank, or a Deutsche Bank, which is into all areas of financial services, right? And an international bank that wants to transform into a modern agile bank. That's one end of the spectrum, right? Then there are, the other end of the spectrum, which is the insurtechs, the fintechs, that are challenging the traditional, organizations. So that's where you have Monzo, Revolut, and you have a number of examples in India, and so on. And in between are organizations that are powering both these ecosystems, right? Which is the ISVs, the players that are, really need to modernize their applications, because not everybody in the financial services world is developing applications on their own, right? So this is truly the ecosystem. And what we've started seeing is that, if I can give you a very simple equation, it's like in the past, people went to the branches to do business, right? You went to a bank branch, or you went to an NBFC's branch and did business, right? Whereas now you need to go to the customer to do business. So I can draw a parallel with the way the Android ecosystem is developed, right? In the past, right, you went to a PCO to make a phone call. Now you have the Android app ecosystem, really, where everybody brings the app to you. And you really need to get that, very nice example that was given there by Rakesh, right, which is n equal to 1. And you really need to know, even in that n equal to 1, what's my preference in the morning and what's my preference in the evening, right? So what really is going to be, I think, the next phase that I'm seeing a lot of the NBFCs adopt is that how can I now truly modernize and get the ROI when I move to the cloud? The first phase was I just move my infrastructure, I get some cost optimization on the infrastructure, but then how do I really start giving a better customer experience? How do I better optimize that omni-channel experience that folks are talking about? So that's what we've started to see, right? And I see that this is going to be like a huge waterfall effect, we started slow, and then we'll rapidly everybody develop, and this is really being triggered by the fact that there are lots of technology companies that are getting into the financial services space as well, and therefore the advent of fintech, insurtech, and so on and so forth.
Fantastic. I think that's a good perspective. You rightly put our, discussion to the next level, which is called as data. Ultimately, all this personalization, all this, regulations are all going to be built around the world of data. And every organization is working towards protection of their data, readying themselves up for the PDP and various other things, and it is most critical element of any business. So how are NBFCs today trying to work towards specializing themselves to attain this level of compliance, looking at the foreign markets, in the European markets, what is going to come to India, what is their expectations from their service providers of infrastructure, etc. Satish, you have not spoken much yet, so I want you to start from a technologist perspective. You have been a banker, you are now a NBFC guy. What is your perspective on this?
I think data is going to be a very interesting place, right? So we are at the threshold of major explosion in the way data is going to be shared between institutions, between banks and intermediaries, and perhaps even between players who are not related when you look at them. So you'll get a car manufacturing sharing data with financial. Okay, so you have all sorts of interplays that are coming now. So when we look at this, right, there are of course upsides, and then there are downsides that we need to kind of watch out for. Okay, so one really exciting thing that's happening is the account aggregate initiative, right? So we've already had one bank that's kind of announced that they are in, and there are a few other players who are working on that. So this account aggregate initiative is really strategic in the way it's putting customer in control of his data. So it's trying to kind of find a balance between providing data to those who need it in a very easy manner, at the same time providing a sort of control over the data, right? So from an Indian context, what we are going to see is that we're going to see players will need to follow this discipline and this compliance aspect, and if they do that, there are rewards to be reaped, right? So we have, I think when Rukesh talked about the life cycle and the challenges that are there, we know that when we are dealing with a lot of paper, right, in the lending cycle, okay, so all that can potentially disappear, right? And then you can have a real online journey, a real instant loan, not just faces or small aspects where you say, hey, we are doing things digital and we are doing things instantly, but you're having an end-to-end journey which can be achieved in a few minutes, right? Completely. So that's what this account aggregator framework will ultimately, provide for us as a lender that we're looking forward to. Now, of course, in the developed markets like the UK as well as EU, this is already established as by law. So you've got the open banking well established, and all the participants have to participate. You don't have a choice. Whereas in India, it's only going to be voluntary to start with. But I think I'm confident it'll take off, even if it's not made mandatory. But the size of our the number of players and the diversity of players, that's where we're going to see a challenge. Are you going to see a rural cooperative bank participate in this initiative? Very, very unlikely in the next 2 or 3 years, right? But we know a lot of our financing is happening at the rural areas, and we do need to kind of provide them also the experience that we want to give to our urban customers, right? So how do we kind of match those challenges? So that's going to be something to kind of watch out for.
Interesting.
Now, from data and data privacy, right? Now, this framework also gives a good structured data protection framework, right? And as an organization, Sundaram Finance, and I'm sure many like-minded organizations are very careful about how they are managing their data today. because it's not something that we need to look for in the future. But even today, there's a whole lot of compliance aspects that we need to kind of adhere to. So when we get into the collaboration aspect, as I kind of touched upon earlier, so who is going to take responsibility for the consent aspects, right? And when a consent expires and you're sharing the data, right? Are you going to manage those kind of responsibilities? Let us put that way, right? So that's going to be a challenge for us. Okay. There are also aspects where we have to kind of grow in terms of how we are going to manage data privacy and data security. Okay. For instance, even today there are many players in the market who are still not getting a customer consent for getting a credit bureau check, for instance, right? So while for some players the data privacy or the data governance aspects will be a moderate challenge, but for others it can be quite arduous.
Interesting. So basically, the data is very critical from the ecosystem, overall ecosystem perspective as well, where you don't only have to use it for experience. At the same time, you have to be responsible when you use this data at the same time. And organizations, I don't know how far has organizations used the data kind of information from the rural marketing or from the lower segment of the customer perspective. But if Suresh can little bit highlight about how innovators are using data, especially in the rural segment of the business, that would also be very helpful.
Yeah, again, it's a great question. Like, no, rural means it's cooked data. That's what so far the definition says, because arriving the authenticity of the information is not so hygienic on that. But surely the post-COVID has given some different changes. Like I'll give an insurance example. Recently, when we took all the vehicle customers to give some insurance, taking care of other initiatives part of Corona, you won't believe they have given all the information what they have part of the medical. That's a way it is. So it's more transparent. Again, it is getting into some different environment. But again, the risk is it's more into the individual customer. It's like our individual body systems. That's what generally rural India people believe. So if they are rugged, tough, like even Corona, they are again out. They are doing all. Only the people who are in urban and metros are inside, are having all the precautions. That's the way reality puts them into the other side of it. But especially coming back to the data, I'll put it that exactly part of the cloud where it is. The kind of tradition which transformation in terms of information still now in India, especially you take to the rural India, it is people thinking about keeping 99.99 uptime, 24/7 operations, or they talk about a high availability. So that's not actual, which is part of the infra or a data which is required in the last mile. They want something like that to create the tailor-made information, and it is available to them, which is based on that demand. So if you call it something called scalability on demand for the last mile. So we are asking a question: can we have data centers at the district level? Can we go closer to the customer rather than sitting closer to the corporates? So how things are matured, high secure. Now get into high security, everybody talks about the tools, compliance, appliance, everything on that. But none of the thing is fixed to find out if particular thing we are trying to do with the transaction, which is less than 200 rupees. Again, what transaction we are going to do at 2000 rupees and what transaction we are going to do at 2 lakh rupees. Today, since we are applying for 2 lakh rupees, we are applying for 200 rupees also. So these are the concerns which until the maturity doesn't come out. And let us understand that 2x performance. What they say 2x performance, when you say month end volumes, we should have the speed and systems available based on high availability. But it's not like it's available throughout the full month. It's available based on that. Again, today in the NBFC point of view, we do so many trial and errors. So we are looking for something called a free space, which is used for trial and error, which if you see, majority of the security team struggles a lot because they are directly deploying it tested at some locations. But in rural India, what happened, every specific district, every specific behaviors of the customers, it's very, very unique. And until those things are not captured part of the system and not get into that information and going back to them as service, that's what I will say, like e-business for rural India is less of electronics, more of emotions. Until that relevant emotions are captured on time and we didn't go back to them on time, that cooks it up. So if somebody calls you at 2 o'clock midnight and somebody expired, they want some money, how fast you do it? So speed and reach are the mantras when you do it in rural India. Again, e-business for us, less of electronics, more of emotions, and get into that to find out even security for 200 rupees, what is that exactly required? 2000 rupees, what is exactly required? 2 lakh rupees, what is required? For 200 rupees also, every time you are asking for a double authentication, even though the regulators say, they will get more wild and they will try to break whatever that devices we put there. We are facing the sequences. So let us understand and appreciate for what volumes, what type of transaction, how it is. That's where the localization happens. That's where the customer, we call it as trust. Means he expects something and how fast we do it within the regulated model, and it is available to them on that. So high availability is not technology. Simplified solution for the customer matters a lot than a technology is available to him to pay highly and take the solution.
Fantastic. That's a good business plus technology and strategy mix that you have brought into this conversation, and very very relevant, because ultimately data is the one of the most important elements that is going to be redefining the game of the future. Mitesh, with this kind of constant focus on data, especially by the organizations, on one side, people are talking about analytics and personalization. On the other side, people are also speaking that how much is too much. Okay. How do you tread this line then?
So on the data side, it's very interesting. At the end of the day, the question really is that, what do you want to do with the data? Right. So the way I look at this is there are two spectrums, right? What is the business problem that we're trying to solve with either the data that you have but you don't know what to do with it? Alternatively, what is the, what is the, you have the data but you don't know what it's telling you, right? Or third, you have data in so many silos and you just are not able to interconnect the dots, right? So in the NBFC parlance, if I can call it, it's called customer 360, right? You have a customer who's come to take a loan from you, right? How do you make sure that, you can A, make sure they are in the right segment, B, once you've given the loan, what's the right time, if you also have an insurance product, to give them an insurance product, right? If they made a claim on a particular insurance product, or if they bought a car, can I also give them, offer a different product in my stable, and if they are running a business. So that's really the cycle that you're talking about, right? Then if you're having a churn, what exactly does that churn mean for you? So from a business perspective, the way the way I like to model it is that, at the end of the day, what are the questions you want to ask of your data? Because I don't think there is a problem with the amount of data one has. And let me give you a classic example that I have seen, especially in NBFCs, and where I think Google technologies can really help. So if you really look at it, let's say the input is really the internal customer data that you have and the external data sources that can give you. So you can essentially classify it into the demographic, which is age, gender, etc. You can say what is the type of employment, and it was, the employment could be basis contributions, salary, group, it could be business, and so on and so forth. What's the type of account information, which is, type of accounts, balances, etc. What are the kind of interactions, the customer is doing with the account? Now, these could all be on input data as an example, and of course, there can be like hundreds of more. What you can do, for example, with specific machine learning models that are already available for the NBFC industry, is that you can have like a sample output which says, what's the likelihood for this customer to churn, right? What's the kind of customer segment they really fall in? What's the lifetime value of this customer? What can you cross-sell if they're already a customer? What can you upsell them to? Is this customer likely to default? Is this customer something where there could be a, potential fraud, right? Now, those are all things for which you can straight away use ML models off the cloud, right? So to me, if I can just simplify this, there are three areas. How do you modernize your databases to be more, let me call them cloud native, for lack of a better term, right? Because then you're far more agile. Second, how do you use modern technologies, loosely AI and ML models, to start getting more out of your data? Third, many companies have invested in warehouses, data lakes, and a variety of other terminologies that we have used, right? But how do you really get the customer insight that you want out of that data? For that, I think the underlying piece is when you don't have to worry about the infrastructure, when you don't have to worry about the speed at which you're able to get the insight. I think that's where the real cloud model starts fitting in. I've usually heard a lot of the NBFC CEOs say this, right? And a lot of banking CEOs say this as well. Can you give us, you know, a data platform that is like Google search? I should be able to, put in a search query and be able to get insight about my customer, in real time. I think that's something that, which has been kind of the panacea for a lot of these, aspects, Babu.
How have you seen the implementation of AI? Especially, we all know that at different silos we have been using AI for different purposes. How are organizations using an integrated AI approach, especially for NBFCs, to get that extra silver lining or the extra edge from their competition to service their customer and get better business out of them? Pratik, am I audible?
Oh yeah, you were very audible. I think I was on mute. I think it's a very again a relevant question. To some extent, Mitesh just answered part of it, but let me try to build upon that. See, I think before I just very specifically answer your question, I think we should look at the need for such models. Why do we need AI models? Definitely in the Indian context, right? See, if I go back, let's say 2 or 3 years, and I'll give you some statistic. The credit penetration in India, even today, it's pretty low, but 3 years back, it was roughly 1/4 of any developed country. Take US for an example. India's credit penetration was 1/4 of US, right? So credit is very under penetrated in India. That's A. B, it's very difficult to assess the underbanked and unbanked customers. How do you bring them into the credit fold, right? You need to assess them for credit, and how do you do that, right? It's not very clear even till late. These models, I'll come to AI, I'll come to big data. It's not very clear. There is a large mass of customers, potential lending customers who you can give loans to. Those are today not getting loans, right? How do you bring them into purview, into lending purview? That's the problem to solve, right? That's the problem. Even today, roughly, I would say around 10%, 12% is the percentage of credit penetration, as in like the customers which take loans in India, and the remaining customers are not taking loans, right? How do you bring them into loans purview, right? That's the problem to be solved. And now, in this perspective, let's now bring another perspective that there are a lot of, I would say, companies which have come up, which have a large mass of customers. They have transaction data. For example, take an e-com player, take a payment gateway, take a payment wallet player, take even a, let's say, a cab aggregator. All these companies have large number of customers with them. They have large I would say data sets available on customers, right? They would have, for example, transaction history, payments history. Some of the companies would even be able to read your mobile phones to some extent, and be able to know your internet usage, your app usage, and so on, right? So there is a lot of data available today in different forms and shape, depending on what channel, what customer, what alliance you are using to get to your customer base and their database, right? How do you use all of this to assess what I was earlier saying, assess the ability of the customer to pay back to you? How do you? That's the problem at hand, right? And this problem, I must share my view, is still in process of being solved. There is no, I would say, there is not one single $1 million answer that has been found, right? Having said that, that is where a lot of AI ML models are coming in. Lenders, fintech lenders, even bigger lenders are experimenting with many models. They are giving out loans using the data that they have, whatever loans they have given out, how it's stacking up, whether it's paying back, not paying back, right? Using that, most of the lenders are building up AI ML models, what Mitesh alluded to just now. And those models are being used. These are self-correcting models. They can continue to shape up, and I would say lenders are in process of finding out many such models across different customer segments, across different product segments, even geographically. Again, all demographic factors, social factors, right? Figuring out which models actually work and can be used in a very, I would say, robust way in lending out, in giving out loans to customers. That is the journey. Now, very specifically coming to the question that you asked, Babu, I would say many companies, many lenders, lending institutions, banks, NBFCs, definitely the fintech lenders are using AI ML based scorecards. These are financial parameters based scorecard, transaction history based scorecard, demogs and social parameters. Again, even potentially reading phone history, multiple. So all these inputs are going in, and these scorecards are being used. What are they being used to? Coming to your personalization question, they are being used to divide customer segments, assess what kind of loan you can give, whether you need security against it, whether what kind of rate of interest can you charge. I would say that's the pinnacle of customization, right? If for the same amount of loan that you are giving, depending on a certain amount of data that you're collecting, you can change the rate of interest. Someone you can give at a 15% rate of interest annually, and another person you can give a 35% rate of interest annually because his record is not pretty straightforward, right? So that is what is happening. I would say most companies are using AI ML models, scorecards, and different, I would say manifestations, but it's still a journey. I don't think anyone has found $1 million answer, but people have matured. They have some reasonable models, and it's going on. That's what I would say, Babu, to your question.
Fantastic. That's a very long answer to a short question, but I think that is precisely the way that we have been working with in most of the NBFC organizations, not just NBFCs across the sector. I don't think NBFC is a different animal altogether from the others in the financial system. A great perspective. As a technologist, thanks for this input. Let me go to the technologist perspective to Satish. Satish, you have been a technologist. Any different perspective as a technologist and some experiences related to this that you would like to share with this forum?
I think Pratik covered the models and and the potential of those models pretty exhaustively. So I've just got a few minor points to add. Just to underline the fact that building models, training models, evaluating and discarding models, the life cycle is something that naturally should be done collaboratively between business and technology, because then you would be able to kind of work on it and take faster decisions. If something's not working, you'll be able to tweak it and find something else, data that's more suitable, and work on that, right? The other point is that we organizations, especially like us and the many others who've got a long history, right? So that's a big mine of information data wealth that can fuel these models. So you've got to kind of leverage all that data you have to give. So which is why the model will be unique from one lender to another, because each of them have got a different history of their customers, history of their products, right? And so you cannot take one model and fit it across all the lenders and say, hey, this is going to work. If it worked for X, it's worked for Y also. That's often not the case. So each organization will have to work out their own custom model and test it and develop it and grow with that.
Yeah.
Interesting. So
if I may just add to that discussion a little bit.
Yeah.
So see, there are 2-3 areas, and I think everybody touched on all of those. But see, when we start talking about AI and ML, I was reading a report just the other day which said about 80% of the implementations that say they are AI ML, they're actually rule based. So there's a big distinction between ML and AI, right? And in progression of that. But in terms of the having to use certain things, right? Like, some of the things that Pratik and Suresh kind of talked about, which were around, new to credit. How do you start assessing new to credit? Now, in China, for example, right? There's a company that's lending about 1.2 million applications a month. And it's doing it for new to credit customers. And financial is also in that same thing, the IPO that kind of went bust. Similarly, there are models that are happening in Indonesia and Vietnam. People are trying, right? But to me, what it comes down to, I think from our perspective in India as to what we do, because I don't think we have got the ready-made models that Satish kind of was talking about, right? But we do have something that Mitesh has talked about. So if you look at both Google as well as AWS SageMaker, for example, they've already got these pre-made algos where these are seeded models that you can use to do anything you like, right? And Mitesh gave quite a few examples around like churn models or lifetime value of the customer or trying to do some predictive analytics around default. So, while what we have done is on our data platform, we have actually tried to get like whatever data we can get onto our data warehouse. Also ensured from a compliance perspective, there's no PII information in our data warehouse, and trying to data democratize that warehouse throughout the organization. So you can start having citizen data scientists who can start using it. But then it also then opens up for anybody in the organizations to then start experimenting to what Mitesh was talking about. Right? And some of the things that we have done, I'll give you one example of it. Like, COVID has presented an opportunity where you are not meeting a customer anymore, and it's happening remotely over a video, right? So, for example, when you are doing a KYC or when you are doing a personal discussion with the customer, how can you analyze the video, the voice, and do some analytics on that to say whether the customer is saying the truth or lying, right? Is the customer happy, sad? I don't know how you can really use that, but it's just experimental stuff at this stage to be able to get this data and maybe bring that also into the risk scorecards, but scorecards, not rule-based scorecards, but, really, where the scorecards are self-learning and learning from the feedback of the loans that have been given in the past. I think that's the holy grail, and I think you'll start seeing a lot of these fintechs and others in India started teaching us some of this stuff. Right?
No, so basically video-based and picture-based analytics are already not something that are new. I have seen definitely a lot of interesting insurance companies looking into this area and doing a lot of wonders. I am sure Mitesh must also have experienced it. I can see him smiling there. And trying to put a nod to this conversation. Anything you wanted to specifically share in this, Mitesh, before
Yes,
you proceed?
absolutely. So, in fact, there are a couple of three very cool technologies. So, especially thanks to what we are seeing, right, where you can see that this conference, otherwise, this talk would have perhaps been face to face on a platform that you would have done, and we are all, you could immediately sense the sentiment using the nods that I was doing. Now, how can you do that for business? So there is something called video AI that Google Cloud directly provides. You can straight away do sentiment analysis using that today, and that's a model available off the cloud, off the shelf, which is there. The second part is, how do you now do sentiment analysis using voice? How do you convert speech to text? And how do you do that in the vernacular languages that India uses, right? So how do you test sentiment when someone is calling your call center, right? How do you automate some of that and be able to give them a very relevant sort of passing on to the right, user? Sometimes, if you're doing a complaint, you can clearly see, you can hear from the voice and make out from the voice the, little bit of an aggression that is there, right? The third is, how do you do, there is a technology called Document AI that Google has got, where you can use documents straight away to, filter out a lot of the things that you can do. You can do customer onboarding very, very easily. You can do video KYC very easily without having to, put a lot of manual effort into it. So the reason I was nodding is that, all these are technologies that have become enablers and become much faster because of the cloud, right? You can always do it in the on-premise world. And to, Rakesh's point, right, the reason the fintechs have started doing it is they never had any legacy. So they always started cloud native, digital native. So as a result, they started using these technologies by default.
Interesting. In fact, that is one of the most important, starting points which the fintech start up with. No legacy, zero legacy. And this is something like how the private sector banks had the advantage over the public sector banks when they started. They could start off with core banking. So the kind of adoption of technology would be very fast. And the same thing that is happening, I was discussing yesterday with Rukesh also on this question about, the Amazons of the world, the telecoms of the world, and all have become competitors today to the financial services business. So it is no longer that an NBFC is competing against NBFC, but it is a NBFC or a bank competing against a telco or a retailer who is also selling insurance online. Correct. So how this swiftness, this agility, this experiential thing can actually empower organizations, or how are they standing in this race against these other competitors today? What do you say, Rukesh? You are smiling. That is your answer, I guess.
Look, I have a strong held belief, and I think I can see a lot of attendees who will hear this from me for many times, because I've kind of talked about this quite a lot within my company as well. I strongly believe that if you are not able to adopt, we are all going to be Kodak moments, right? So to be able to work in the VUCA world, which is of today's world, you don't know what is coming in future. And future is changing so dynamically that if you don't have the agility to steer very quickly, then you can become history anytime. You never know, right? So that is, I think that is the key. And, some of the things that I kind of really stress in my organization, which is around this agility piece. As an organization, as a technology organization, I want us to be able to measure what I call, time to value. I mean, my version of time to value, and there may be many others, is how do I get something from ideation to production in the least amount of time? And how do I build the DNA culture of the organization, the applications, the systems, the platforms, such that as the complexity increases, the time to value don't increase, but the time to value on continuous basis with the agile culture, how do you shorten the time to value, right? And if you can do that, in my mind at least, if you can deliver things from ideation to production very quickly, then you can very quickly adapt to any future that is going to throw you, right? Because you don't know, future is very uncertain. So, that's my take on it. Babu, you're on mute, actually, you're saying something.
Yeah, the successful person is basically the one who can estimate what is going to be the future and take, the kind of inputs and basically take the right action at the right step. It is like being in a stock market and estimating which stock is going to go up and go down, right? Yeah. So great. I think we have had a very good participation from the audience as well. So there are a lot of questions that have come up in the scenario. While I have a couple of more questions related to RegTech, GRC, and what is next, maybe we can probably, take up one of it, what is next at least. But before that, I wanted to at least sort out one or two questions from the teams. So one interesting question that I have seen is, any regulatory requirements or for hosting workloads on the public cloud, especially from RBI or NSE, not NSE may not be the regulator, but at least RBI or SEBI or IRDA or any of the other regulators. Any inputs any of the panelists would like to share on this?
I can just give a small color to it. I think a lot of times the regulations, I think the policy making bodies have been fairly advanced in the way they have set the policy. I think what needs a better understanding is the interpretation of that policy always. Right. I remember a few years back when the first, policy came out, people simply said, oh, we don't want to use the cloud because we are not allowed to put data on the cloud. What the policy said is that you can't have PII data stored outside of India, right? But then, as you can see, we typically tend to go the other extreme, right? And we interpret the policy, in a particular way. However, I think what IRDAI, for example, has done is that they have a thought paper on, specifically using cloud computing, right? And they keep evolving it. I think there have been 3 versions of that already. Similarly, if you look at IDRBT has a thought paper as well, right? Of course, there are some certain provisions within the Data Privacy Act and the impending, data privacy bill as well, right? Where we all know, some of the impacts of that. However, what has been very interesting is, I think, generally all policy making bodies are now beginning to move away from just data sovereignty to sovereignty overall, in the sense that what happens to application sovereignty, what happens to software sovereignty, what happens to data center sovereignty. So all of these are areas that I think the policy making bodies, including NIC, have started looking. There is one clear certification that I think everybody is required to do, which is the MATI certification, right? That is the only one defined certification for cloud service providers in India. All the others are depending on which part of the industry you are in, because you could be in insurance, there's a very different regulatory body. You could be in the lending part, which is a very different sort of regulatory environment, and so on. And banking, of course, is a totally different sort of regulatory environment.
Interesting. And one more good question that I have seen in this entire Q&A is that we spoke about differential pricing, differential interest rate, or probably using AI to get a kind of preferential treatment to customers. So one question is this are the banks and NBFCs in India already practicing the ROIs, or rate of interest, allowed, or probably pricing their rate of interest according to the profiles of customers, or are they still very regulated? And how are organizations looking at it? And will AI is going to help on this? What is your take on this, Pratik?
Sure. I think from a regulatory point of view, it is allowed, of course. So banks, lenders, NBFCs, they are pricing differentially for different customers. And I think the equation is broadly, it is about assessing the risk of the customer. And depending on the risk that you see of the money either coming back or not coming back to you, you price. Obviously, there are other variables like, if it's a secured loan, your comfort can increase and you can price typically lower, right? If it's a loan against property, if there is any security attached to the loan, right, you can price lower. If it's an unsecured loan, and suppose you have a strong comfort, you've seen the balance sheets, you've seen the banking statement, you've seen the GST of the company, maybe you can price it lower, as opposed to a small ticket loan, which is being given to a retail customer and you have very limited data to assess that customer. Potentially, you might want to charge a higher rate of interest on such loans, right? Also, on a small ticket loan, even the effort that has to be put into collecting that, tracing the customer, chasing the loan back is costly enough, right? You would rather write it off in some, depending, on case to case, right? So I think there is reasonable flexibility allowed by the regulators, for lenders to price the loans depending on the risk, so it's a risk reward equation. That's what I would say.
Fantastic. So that means there is definitely a lot of promise for AI to play in that, or cloud to play in that, or whatever it is. Ultimately, technology can still have an upper hand in helping organization to play in that. Fantastic. So that's a good perspective, Pratik. Before we wrap up, let us try to have one point from you on a wish list about what do you see as an important step in fast tracking the next level of growth. What is in the wish list for that? Let's start with Satish. Satish.
I think we've covered in the course of this discussion a lot of exciting, initiatives that we all are picked up and we all want to pursue, right? I think driving them to some sort of conclusion is going to be a very demanding and challenging, as well as a fulfilling exercise for us. So, a lot of the initiatives that we talked about from the AI, ML front, as well as from the data, utilizing data more effectively and participating in a in an account aggregator framework, as well as how we leverage cloud, because from our perspective, we are definitely taking this in a very graded approach. So we would like to kind of make that a little more progress on that, and see how much we can leverage that better.
Fantastic. So you already said your wish list. Pratik, what about your wish list? So what is that one wish you want God to grant you?
Sure. I think this the panel discussed the NBFC account aggregator, and there is the Oken, which is another marketplace concept. But basically, the availability of, rather than getting lost in the terms, I would say the availability of standardized data across a large customer base, potentially all of India. Whether it is banking data, your mutual funds, your stocks, your insurance data, your repayment track record, your financial payments history, all of that, or even transactions history, all of that with your, when I say your, basically any customer's consent, if that data can be made available, which is what the NBFC AA account aggregator concept is all about. If that data is made available to the lenders to assess and then be able to give out loans, I think that will remove a lot of the informational, I would say, asymmetry that exists today between a lender and potential customer. There's a lot of information asymmetry, right? If that is removed, the lending market as a whole will become far more efficient. My belief is, there'll be a significant increase in credit penetration in India. So that'll be my wish list for you, Babu. Your interesting question.
Fantastic. So there are some aspect of it which is already handled or granted by way of DEPA, DEPA, and
Yes.
Sehmati. These are the two things. Maybe you would like to go online and check more about it. But DEPA and Sehmati are two very interesting things where this is already happening to some extent, and we can always look at more and more consolidation of this. I think the banks are talking very strongly about it.
Yes.
The NBFCs and insurance and everyone in the ecosystem, and the fintechs. Fintechs are basically looking at data sharing in a big way to bring their businesses up. In the period to come, maybe it may become a reality soon. Fantastic. Rukesh, as a CTO, what is your perspective?
I don't know if it's CTO related, but I'd look at, in my wish list would be that 5 trillion economy, right? It effectively means all our incomes double, right? But more broadly though, if you talk about lending, today we are only talking about people who has got credit file, right? Which is about 100, 200, or maybe 300 million. Maybe Pratik and others know what that number is, right? But then what about the Bharat customer, which is that new to credit? And that's what we need to crack. Because if we can make the money supply available in the economy, 5 trillion is very easily possible, right? But there is no way we can assess the new to credit. And therefore, in my wish list, which is some of the things you talked about, the account aggregator, but if you, some of you would have seen, or if you haven't seen it, you should look up the iSpirit, OCEN, and Sehmati and account aggregator. But iSpirit has got this slide around life of Rajni, right? Which talks about the whole of India stack and how it kind of all comes together. So so in my, in the next horizon of 6 months to 1 year is around this OCEN. How can we make that successful? How we can get more and more participants. I think both of you kind of talked about that, Pratik and Babu, which is about, can you make all the information available? Because as you can make more information available, the money supply can be increased, because now you can lend to more people. And if you can lend to more people, the 5 trillion economy, I don't know where it has gone after pandemic, but, we can still get there.
So one very interesting step towards this is the, new umbrella payments which the government is planning to take up. where they are talking about setting up parallel NPCIs, which can actually facilitate credit growth into the different aspects. And one of the major concerns of the finance ministry has been in the area of low penetration in the rural areas and into the low income groups, the banking services. And when the money reaches the banking services, when the payments reach the segment, automatically the credit follows. That gives you a better statistic. So I am sure that this can definitely be a good lead towards the growth of credit into the rural areas. And I can see Suresh Shanmugam smiling his way there, because I think that is his market which we are touching upon. So Suresh, what is that Brahmagyan that you would like to share there, and what is that interesting wish list you would like to share?
Okay, before getting into the wish list, I would want to at least share my research, what are we are doing during this COVID. One is what we are in the name of earn to pay model. We went and did some survey with the Kirana shops, what type of thing they were doing, what type of finance it is. So given a chance, it's like people get around some 20,000 rupees that what are for the monthly, and they are able to get daily minimum 3,000 out of that daily wages kind of shop. After or during COVID, they started getting beyond 20,000 rupees per day, because the nearest people living here, they were trying to take as much as they can. They want to buy from the small shop, which is available everything. The extreme from artificial intelligence is what we have to remove ATM machine, and we have to put a grinder, because majority of the people are trying to use more atta there, which has to be more than 2,000 rupees, which ATM machine is not yielding to him on a daily basis. So I'm just putting that artificial intelligence, how it works in India to do that. Second, again, while cutting the receipts in rural India, nobody takes the exchange. They don't have cash to collect it, because we have to go cash them on the field and interior parts and try to collect it. So we have an option in the system to capture, to find out. He can donate this to anything else. He can even give for freebies so that he can get it for him. He can even book a ticket, something like that, so that that amount won't be given back to him. So till last year, the amount was given maximum for the freebies. This is the first year. 40% is given for free people food. Even though he is poor, he is also into the normal whatever it is. 40% of the people given the remaining exchange for the people for poor. So what I'm trying to say is the humanity, what we are seeing, even though those people are struggling with all those things, trying to do it. And the other one is astrological message. We do print astrological message on the receipt saying, being a Kanya star, you will get your money back. Something to keep more emotional, so the customer will be happy. You won't believe during this whatever happened, majority beyond receipts, the amount of collection is more on the astrological message. That too, they want in detail what all things are required by the transporters. So what I'm trying to say, beyond artificial intelligence, beyond this, we have something to do, which is an earn to pay model, and slightly come out of public cloud, private cloud, hosted cloud. We should get into community cloud. That's where India is lagging today, where irrespective of NBFCs, irrespective of banks, irrespective of cooperative banks, they should be available there. When you talk about rules, regulations, systems, core, let us use bank. But when you talk about customers, everything, let us focus on cooperative banks. When you talk about service, let us talk about NBFC. So such things can be available, part of it. That could be my wish list. Anything to do with that. If you want to fight against money lenders, these all three people should come together. Otherwise, money lenders till now, 65% during COVID also, they are doing very good business. I don't know what artificial intelligence they do, what technology they put. They are earning more than all of us. If we want to challenge that, wish list should be bank as a core systems, cooperative bank as customer services, NBFC as means reach and speed, faster service. All these three should come together for the customer. You should not name it. It's a bank, NBFC, cooperative bank. Service should be available. We should share part of a community cloud. That will be my wish list. There really you can see, we are all spoke about, that will at least achieve 60 to 70%. Otherwise, money lenders will enjoy. We will keep on talking about so many things. They are not going to use the Googles of the world. They are not going to use the IBMs of the world. They are going to use what is near to them. These three people have to go closer to them. I think Babu know me. So my wish list is what? Let us go with what he wants rather than what we have.
Fantastic. That is a good analogy to put forward. And one of the most important thing that he has, which you don't have, is you are all regulated and he is not. So he can do what he likes. Okay.
The challenge, that is the challenge, but we have to break that. It is our competition. That's what I'm saying. See, like even this post-COVID, they have the people who have funded a lot. They are still doing it. So, which
Fantastic.
somewhere has to stop. The purpose has to be achieved.
Correct.
That's what my wish list.
Excellent. And Mitesh, can you just wrap up all this wish list and say that what is possible?
I think my wish list is that I hope that every single panelist wish list come true. And, as Google and Google Cloud, we are able to help them. Right, as simple as that. But I do think that technology has a very important role to play, and Google can certainly help there. I would simply say that all of us should align all the digitization and digitalization efforts to the changing customer expectation, whether they are in rural India or whether they are retail customers in urban India, or they are corporate customers. The second is that we have the ability to use data driven insights to really improve the business performance, the operations, and customer experience. The third is, I think we truly have the opportunity to modernize technology, right? We identify the right, whatever the technology stack is, whether it is built on legacy, whether it's built on open source, doesn't matter. But we have the opportunity to modernize technology. And I think the final thing is really we can accelerate the pace of reskilling and building, a very diverse and digital workforce. And for that, you can use collaboration. I think the whole work from home didn't get discussed very much, but work from anywhere is a reality, right? So I think all of these is what I can do, and I truly hope all the wish lists of our panelists come true, and we are very happy to partner with them on any of those wish lists.
Fantastic. I think that was a very good encapsulation from your side, Mitesh, and that truly puts a good perspective also to all the dreams that everyone is looking towards creating a strong financial ecosystem of the future. Ultimately, all of your businesses are built on one very important thing: trust. The customer has to trust you. You have to trust your technology service providers, because ultimately you are all taking responsibility of something, someone to deliver something on time. And your word counts a lot. So, fantastic. We will take it forward to the next level and keep conversing you in the future conversations. Thank you very much, everybody. We hope to see you in the future conversations also. Thank you very much.
Fine, fine.